for some reason, the criminal cases that interest people in uh, tend to involve sort of, in one way or another, you know, sort of semi-glamorous defendants. I mean, there are lots of exceptions to that, as those black kids who are well, even so, those white kids who killed the black kid on the wars of Queens or someplace. But I mean, I was just thinking as I was walking over here. I mean, I think about this, but you talk about whether I like New York or not. I've been coming to New York for a long, long, long time, and I have my own views about it. But I must confess, my views of New York. I mean, just getting off the train today and walking, taking the cab up to the hotel and walking over here, I now see New York through sort of the Tom Wolfe's eyes because
Oh,
of
don't do that.
yeah, those people are such despicable people. Every single one of them in that book are so despicable. They're so despicable. They're unlikable people. But when you think about it, I mean, the point I guess I'm trying to make is the book is. I mean, it has a real theme and a real focus because the defendant is the glamorous New York yuppie. This guy, he's making $3 million a day. And I really think lots of crime, real life crime stories are interesting because of the defendant's sort of social status and his effectiveness. I think that's one reason for lots of people like Jeff interested in that case.
People were interested in Jeff's case because
I mean, you read any of those damn stories almost from the first day, and you saw Dr. Princeton, handsome. Yeah. I mean, you saw those things. Sure. Then you saw murder and wife and kids and all that stuff, but you saw that, and that's what people were interested. And I think that the defendant, the lawyers and the hangers on, of whom I count Joe, were interested in it not because it was a wife and two kids who got killed, but it was because Dr. Princeton officer,
as opposed to common criminals.
Sure.
Yeah. But you're saying that Jeff is really different from usual glamorous like Van Bulow or.
No, I put him in that same category. He's different because the people who are on his side, the defendant's supporters, can I really do? I mean, I presume most defendants' mothers love them, and they'll love them. In this case, that may not be true. There's many cases, but in most cases, criminal defendants have no supporters. I mean, their families may support them, a few friends, but you can't find a constituency beyond their families or whatever. But you can in Jeff's case. I mean, or you can in Von Bulow's case, or you can in this guy in whatever his name was, the guy who strangled the girl in Central Park. I mean, there's more interest, and once there's more interest, there's more sort of middle class identification with that. Upper middle class identification, if you will. And that's true of the people who actually work on the case too. I mean, it's easier to work on a case where there's that kind of interest and that kind of support than if you don't know that kind of case. It's just a fact of life. That's why, I mean, I'm sure that's true of Bernie and Sarah and all these other people.
But I mean, to the total outside world, all these people seem bad, right? I mean,
seem what?
They seem like bad people. Like Van Bulow to me seems like they're totally bad.
Oh, I must confess I didn't follow it.
I didn't follow that much.
I don't think I personally didn't get that view. I mean, I got the view that I don't think I would particularly like him, but I don't like that. I don't like that social strata. I don't like people. Maybe I'm jealous. Maybe I wish I were those people. I tend to not like people who just sort of live off of the past, the accumulated wealth of the past, and that's what Von Bulow and his wife did. But I don't think he was a bad person. I never thought he was a bad person, and to be honest, I never thought that he killed her or tried to kill her. But I never thought about it much one way or another.
I definitely don't like my thinking either, but somehow I just, my automatic reaction is yes, Van Bulow, he probably did it. He's terrible. The whole thing is distasteful. And
Yeah, that was good.
I think to a lot of people, Jeff Nichols, especially since that,
That's yeah.
It's distasteful. I agree.
a bad man. So my question, maybe the people who know Van Bulow, think he might be a nice man. I don't know. This is what interests me about this piece, just these images and the novelistic, what you
Well,
were.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I had dinner last night with the mother of one of Jeff's and my college freshman roommates, a guy named Rock Kramer. And Rock dropped out of Princeton at the end of his freshman year for many reasons. Anyway, Mrs. Kramer was very nice to me. We were talking about the first time I ever saw Washington was from her apartment, which overlooks the city. It's up behind the Iwo Jima Monument. It's a beautiful view. She still lives in. And she's getting older, and she has a broken foot, so she kind of walks like an old lady now. And she's known Jeff a long time. They were not close friends, but she knew Jeff a long time. And I haven't seen her probably in 10 years. And I figured, well, I would call up. And I really didn't particularly want to talk about Jeff. I mean, in fact, I didn't even think that we were going to talk about Jeff because I hadn't seen her for a while. And then, she and Rock and Rock's wife, and they had a new baby. And I thought, well, that's what we're going to talk about. But eventually I got around to Jeff. Mrs. Kramer said it's amazing what she remembered about that case because she has not been really in touch with him. She's been in touch with me, and occasionally she would talk to me about it, but usually not. And she wanted to know how Jeff was, and I told her how Jeff was and what's going on and so on. And she said something that really surprised me. She said, I always thought he was innocent, but I wasn't so sure once I saw that picture of him in People magazine. I don't know whether you know what that's all about.
No.
Well, before the trial started, People wanted to do a story about Jeff. And Bernie, ever interested in getting press coverage, said sure. And at the time, Jeff had a girlfriend who was just she's really pretty, well, nice, pretty, but very, very pretty. She looks like a Southern California bimbo. She's so pretty and so cute and was such a good figure that you really, when you look at her and you most people would never think that she's actually a very nice person, real smart person. And that Jeff and her relationship went a lot farther than this sort of bimbo image of hers. But people, I mean, so I've been told, I wasn't there. People show up with this photographer and this little, some person writer, and they show up and they immediately get a look at her and they immediately drag her and Jeff out to the boat, which is parked in the back, and pose them on the boat. And this is like, a month or 2 months or something like that before the trial. Here is Southern California accused doctor with bimbo on boat.
Yeah.
And that's what the People magazine, I mean, they took hundreds of pictures, I've been told, all over the place. But those are the pictures that ran. And those are the pictures that Mrs. Kramer remembered.
Sure.
She just thought,
that's very strange.
This guy must be, I mean, he must have been, so insensitive to his wife and kids. I mean, forgetting the fact this was really, at that point, it was what, 7, 8 years, 6, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years after the murders, that, it's kind of irrelevant, but that's what people, hot, glamorous doctor, hot, glamorous Southern California girlfriend on boat. It interested people. It tweaked their imaginations, but it sure didn't generate a lot of sympathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I said, for somebody who was and is naturally sympathetic to Jeff, it's what she remembers. She had about 10 years worth of I mean, she remembered that more vividly than the book and the mini series, which she didn't like. She remembered those pictures.
Yeah, I have a friend who remembers the Mike Wallum shows. I thought there's something about
Yeah.
that of these people.
It was mentioned in the trial. I mean, every time it just galled the prosecutors. They brought it up, and you could see these little sort of Justice Department bureaucrats. I'm not talking about the North Carolina prosecutor who always knew he was going to be sort of gentry of Raleigh. He had a different view of life, and actually, Blackburn was actually a much more sort of I think it's a decent person, but the real Justice Department bureaucrats, Murtaugh and what's his name, Warhide, that boat galled them. And they never wasted an opportunity to bring to Judge Dupree's or anybody else they got attention. In fact, Jeff had a boat parked at his back door, just because they could never have one. It's not their kind of lifestyle, and they knew, and rightly so, that it was not the kind of lifestyle that most people in North Carolina can think about. And I mean, that boat meant a lot to them.
Semiotic. It's everything in it.
But that's as I said, those are the people who sort of grouped around Jeff. Did it. I mean, they did it for various reasons, but mostly because he was a not just a cause, but a person that they either could identify with or wanted to identify with. Some of these people, had never in their lives, I don't think, thought they could have a cause who was as likable. I mean, it's easy to have a cause when the cause is a little likable. I mean, it's sort of like being for homeless puppies or something. That's easy to be. Yeah.
My experience in Dominican.
Were you at Terminal Island? Was that where you?
Excuse me?
You saw him at Terminal Island.
I still return on. Yeah. First time I saw him, I was rather mystified by him. And the second time, I really did just feel his likable.
Yeah, he's very likable. He's changed a lot to my way of thinking. And it's partly I've changed a lot too. I mean, I knew that. Jeff used to be a lot more likable. He was a lot easier to get to know right away. See, he really didn't have. He didn't have this sort of persona that he, I think, almost consciously now sort of tore and puts on. He used to be a pretty naive guy. This has taught him a lot, and it's not for the better. But you can't blame him.
The better.
From my point of view, what's worse about him is he's going to become a real prisoner. I mean, a physical prisoner. He has become a prisoner of his case, his image, and his, what people expect of him. And he has become a prisoner of the publicity, and the publicity, the most of all publicity, is Joe McGinnis, and he has become he is. You can start to see, not start to. I mean, you see, he now judges his actions and his words and his affects by what people will think if they have read that book, and what he can do to undo that. And it's not spontaneous at all. I mean, even Jeff is not a spontaneous or a friendly, open person anymore, at all. And he used to be. He used to be a real. In fact, one of the reasons is that Jeff and I were not particularly real close uh, friends in college is I've never been that way. He was, and we did, and I don't. I mean, I warm up to people like that. I like people like that, but I've never been myself real, open and friendly and just talk to people on the street, make friends real easy. He always did. Now, and after a while, you get to like that way. So now it's much more. I mean, guarded is the right word, but a lot of people don't know that that's guarded. A lot of people think he still is very open and friendly and outgoing, but there is now a method to that, and it's just, I think, very conscious. And I mean, he has to be. He's got to make friends with people who first of all, he can't do anything himself, so he's got to manipulate people around him. And secondly, in prison, you have to manipulate people who can do bad things to you by being, whatever it is you're going to be. And then that's what he is. He's not, well, as I said, he's not a spontaneous guy. Very, very thoughtful. What he does and what he says. And I guess, in one sense, that's a good thing. That's maturity.
Well, in control of you.
Yeah, that's true. But it's also, in terms of, sort of maybe sort of old time friendship, it's a little disconcerting to see that happen.
Well, in your interaction, I would think that wouldn't converse.
Well, it doesn't
You're on
occur
his
as
side
much.
already,
Yeah,
huh?
it doesn't. That's true, but it doesn't. Jeff still, even with me, and as I said, I mean, I really do count Jeff as one of my best friends. So Jeff knows that I don't need him and he needs me. Didn't used to be that way. I mean, it used to be we didn't, neither one of us really needed the other. We were friends. We so went through a lot together. But now it's pretty clear he needs me to do certain things, whether I do them or not. He has no real control over, but he needs me to do them. And always get the feeling I mean, maybe it's just because you're in a little small room and they bring him in handcuffs. So it's real clear to me, that that's there's a different role playing situation here than it used to be when Jeff would take me out on his boat. He was in charge, and since he drove the boat and I had the beer menu. It's much different now. And he plays it much different. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him. But it's also not very pleasant.
You find it not pleasant.
No, I know. I have never liked personal relationships where somebody wanted something out of me, which in many cases I couldn't do, but it doesn't matter. I like personal relationships that are sort of, two-sided. This isn't two-sided. I don't. Jeff doesn't have anything to offer me anymore other than his friendship.
Right.
And see, it didn't used to matter because he never, Jeff made more money than I did, but it didn't matter because I could do what I wanted. I mean, Jeff and I kind of had a similar lifestyle in some ways, and I didn't need him for anything other than, I liked his friends, I liked his family, I liked his boat, I liked all this stuff. They didn't need it, so it was like a real, sort of.
Well, I think what you're saying is very important. It's the sort of the fundamental of friendship. It's balance, parity.
And it's no longer that way. And I know it's no longer that way, and so does he. It's tough to preserve. That's sort of what used to be, because what used to be isn't anymore.
So you feel it's kind of hollow and
Hollow's the wrong word. I mean, it's not hollow. It's I mean, there's a. I think. I mean, I don't speak to Jeff. I think there's a real sincere like on his part for me, and that's certainly reciprocated.
Yeah.
But I mean, like isn't enough anymore. What's not what because Jeff doesn't need people to like him. He needs people to like him and do something for him. And that's that's one of the problems of being a lawyer or and Joseph. That, it's the problems, I suppose, of being a writer that somebody that you're making a pitch to. Oh, Jeff made a pitch to Joe. Probably made a pitch to you. I don't know to like him, not just like him, but do something for him.
But I feel in my situation, it's a fair exchange.
It
I mean,
is.
he is giving me something. He is giving me
Yeah,
a
it
chance
is.
to write about him. And
Well, and Jeff,
possibly
yeah,
what I'm giving him, possibly something good may come out
yeah.
of it.
But in as I said in the tomatoes with buffalo cheese.
Yeah, no,
Are you happy? Should we look at?
No, I'm not.
I got them from the forest.
One of the problems of traveling is you eat all the time. I mean, I'm at home. I do not. I eat one meal a day, but for the last week, I have had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and drinks.
You just eat in the evening and don't eat during the day.
Yeah. Usually that's what I do, yeah, and I usually go to I go to the gym during lunch. So there's two purposes: gives you exercise and you don't eat. So, but when you travel, you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Anyway, I mean, I forgot where I was. I mean,
We were talking about these balances and the pitch that the subject makes to the writer. What he was. Yes, I guess he was displaying himself in a certain way to Joe, and it backfired.
it backfired. But the real problem with that was, they said Jeff is not well enough. Well, I'm not sure he would make the mistake again. But the in Jeff's case, because he was pretty. I mean, Jeff clearly wanted Joe to like him. And Jeff wants everybody to like him. But in Joe's case, he wanted Joe more than anything else for one thing, because he really did want, as he used to say, a positive book. But he knew that there was no obligation on Joe's part to write a positive book as long as it was a fair book. And he was trying to convince Joe that a fair book meant a positive book. And Joe kept saying, "You're right. It does." And so, Jeff won. I mean, Jeff, after about a year of that, Jeff had won the battle from Jeff's point of view, because he had convinced Joe, from Jeff's point of view, that I'm a likable guy. I didn't do it. And Joe kept saying, "You're right. And not only that, I'm going to be fair to you. I mean, I'm going to show that." And once that happened, all of Jeff's armor just dropped away. And I would think that probably the only guy, even including me, maybe even including his mom, that Jeff really let his guard down to was Joe. I mean, much more than is ever, not ever, but probably on a continuing basis. Jeff let his guard down to Joe more than he ever did to any of his lawyers. Me, who was his friend, Bernie, who was sometimes his friend, sometimes not, but nevertheless, Jeff really placed a lot of trust in Bernie. But Bernie had such terrible blindsides, and Jeff knew that Bernie had blindsides. And there were just some things about Jeff's personal life and personal feelings that I don't think Bernie ever figured out. I don't know whether it's because Bernie just didn't know or didn't want to know, or Jeff didn't understand. But I don't think that's true of Joe. I mean, I think Jeff really tried as best he could to be as open and winning, and lovable, friendly, and everything else he could be to Joe, because A, he knew Joe liked him, or that's what he thought. And B, he knew that if that were in fact true, it would translate into a book that Jeff would like to be a part of.
Yeah,
And it turned out neither one of those turned out to be true.
But another paragraph, not only was the book not favorable to him.
Ano the man
Didn't present him in
Well, I
this
know.
manner. But it was so vague. I mean, he doesn't come
Yeah.
across as anybody.
Well, I know.
I mean,
And,
he wrote it as if he wasn't close to him at all.
yeah, well, that's the strange. I mean, to me, that is the most strange thing about Joe's book. I mean, leaving aside, so I've always said, if Joe had decided Jeff was guilty, then that's what Joe decided. And I tried to change. I mean, I never thought I was trying to change Joe's mind. I thought I was trying to convince him, at least I didn't think he was guilty. But I knew that Joe had the option of not believing that, and Jeff knew that too. But what I didn't know was that Joe had the option of essentially disliking Jeff. And that's because Joe never, I mean, not only did Joe never give the hint that that, in fact, was what he apparently really felt, or says he felt, but it was just the opposite. Joe, I mean, Joe gave every indication he really liked Jeff. He really liked, he believed him, he liked him, he trusted him. He was this little macho buddy of Jeff's. They ran together. They swapped girl stories together. I mean, they did all this macho stuff together. And it came as something of a surprise that either that was a fraud or Joe has a real changeable personality. And as I said, from my point of view, I shared that feeling that Jeff shares. Apparently, I mean, I liked Joe. I thought Joe was, I mean, as I said, I never really thought about Joe as being on our side, but I always thought about Joe as being a friend, somebody who wouldn't betray your confidences, like, and that wouldn't ever. I mean, whatever else he said about you would never say you're a bad person. I mean, I always assumed that Joe could say you're a good person who did that, but never that you were a bad person.
No, I mean, once he decided that Jeff was guilty, he just wrote him off. He didn't want to have anything more to do with him.
Well, he
and
didn't just write him off. He wrote a different kind of
Yeah.
Jeff. There's a different.
Yeah, but because he could, I mean, there's something fascinating about people who do bad things who are likable, or just people who do bad things. I mean, the opportunity to try to understand somebody who did something like this, it's an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, well, as I said, I always sort of assumed. I mean, this is my own assumption about what Joe is trying to do. I must confess, as I said, if I had read Joe's books before rather than after the trial, I would have been much more hesitant about talking to Joe because as I said, I think Joe's books are they tight. They all betray the same kind of get to know the person and stick him in the back. But I didn't know that at the time. I mean, I knew about. Maybe it's because I hated Nixon as much as Joe hates Nixon, and I thought, well, that isn't really betraying Nixon because he's a despicable human being himself. So I never thought about the Nixon book, and I hadn't read the other books. And I always sort of assumed that what Joe was doing was getting to know the folks, particularly Jeff and to be honest about it, I personally thought one of the focuses of that book was going to be Bernie because Joe hated him and he made no bones about it. He really disliked Bernie. Bernie was blind to it. Bernie had he just was oblivious.
Jeff told me that he didn't like Sarah, but I didn't know that
He didn't like Bernie much either. He would, and one of the reasons he didn't like Bernie because he didn't like Sarah. But Joe thought that Bernie was Joe thought Bernie was using Jeff, using the case for Bernie's own ego gratification. And Joe thought that was reprehensible. But then Joe thinks what most lawyers do is reprehensible. But he thought that in particular was reprehensible because Bernie essentially was using this was what I was getting. Maybe I was wrong. This is what I was getting. Was that Joe thought it was reprehensible to use the misery of others for your own personal aggrandizement. And they thought that's what Bernie was doing. And not only that, Bernie was using this case, this guy, this Jeff, and everybody around to not just to aggrandize himself legally, but personally, because Bernie, I mean, Joe caught on right away. Bernie likes followers. He likes an entourage. And he had an entourage, and the entourage was dependent, and it depended entirely on the fact that Bernie was in control of this defense. And so Bernie could have psychiatrists, he could have Sarah, he could have law clerks, he could have Joe, he could have reporters hanging around him, not because Bernie is the world's most fascinating guy, but because Bernie was in charge of this case. Well, Joe realized all that, I thought, and hated him, just hated him. And just was just, he was just vituperative about how awful that kind of person is. Maybe one of the reasons he hated him so much because he was hung around Bernie too, just like the rest of them, waiting for Bernie to dispense the next day's worth of trial strategy or whatever. But in any event, I really thought it was, get back to what I thought Joe was doing, was trying to just sort of get close enough to these folks to really talk about them as human beings caught up in this otherwise nasty business. And as you said, when I read that book, Jeff isn't in that book in a lot of ways. Bernie isn't in that book. Freddie Kassab isn't in that book, although apparently, I don't know, but apparently Joe spent a lot of time with Freddie Kassab. There are these sort of stereotypical people are in that book. Maybe that's maybe it's a function that Joe isn't a very good writer, although I never really thought that. I must confess, I judged Joe a lot more harshly than that. I always thought he was a good writer, in this case, who set out to do bad things. But maybe it's just he really didn't catch these people, at least from my point of view, he didn't catch these people.
I think you're right.
Huh?
I think it's an aptitude rather than.
Well, it may be. It may very well be. And
the stereotypic actress.
It may very well be. As I said, I've never, now that I've read some of these other books that Joe has written, I must confess I may agree with you, although
even a Nixon book now, it's pretty thin. I mean,
it is. Yeah, you're right. But that he was a young man at the time. Actually, so the book that really, it's a book I couldn't imagine. Well, yes, I can, because I talked to him about it. I had not read, the Alaska book because it wasn't out. But Joe sent me a copy. It was a very nice copy, and he sent it to me, and I remember looking at the title and thinking, because I had read. I mean, I'm a big fan of John McPhee, and I had read John McPhee's Alaska book, and I thought, why would a guy, right in the title, tell you that here's a book that is out to top John McPhee, and then you read the book and you realize, but what John McPhee, it's just a book you read and you compare what John McPhee did with his one little town and what Joe did with his old giant state. What John McPhee did with his one little town was you really came. All those people in that little town, whatever that was, weren't likable people, but they were definitely people you sort of understood, or at least I thought you understand. You kind of understand what they're doing there, their attitudes in life are, why it is that those folks went to Alaska and what Alaska means to them, and sort of a bigger sense what Alaska means to anybody who has those kinds of dreams. Then you read Joe's book about Alaska, and you realize there's not one person in that Alaska book that, apparently, some of whom Joe spent a lot of time with, that Joe ever really got to like or know or understand or try to.
Yeah.
What he got me was a sort of a bunch of vignettes about, here's the world's biggest, last frontier and it's doomed. And here are all the folks who make it doomed. And maybe that's all true. I mean, I don't know, but if it's all true, you don't get it from the from knowing those people. You get it because that's what Joe tells you. When he says all these people are bad for the following reasons: they drink too much, they're shallow, they don't understand, blah, whatever it is. And I must confess, I was really quite surprised by that, because when maybe it's because I hadn't read much by Joe, but talking to Joe, he talks a really good game. I mean, if he were as good a writer as he is, just sort of a interviewer, conversational, he should get the flavor of the people he talks to. He's very empathetic. I like him. I did like him. You can talk to him. You think he really understands. He doesn't seem to.
Completely different casket.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I understand. I understand. But I didn't understand that with Joe. I mean, maybe because I didn't know Joe very well, and I didn't learn about. I didn't meet Joe as a writer. As a writer, having read him, met Joe as a person who was hanging around. And in that sense, and that's how Jeff met him too. Jeff was not a great literary scholar, and probably still isn't. And you meet Joe, and you. I guess this is sort of the fact he had a couple of books published and it was a newspaper writer. You sort of assume he has some kinds of talents, and you assume that he translates into writing what you think is his personal.
I think also whether this kind of writing that he does, it's good enough if it's about somebody else, but if it's about somebody
well,
then you suddenly begin to see how weak it is.
Yeah, that's always true. I've had relatively small. I guess I talked. Remember we were talking about some of that. I had relatively small experience with the press, just sort of the day-to-day press. I had not this case, and they never get it right. But you always assume, and I always assume they never get it right because they have so little time to to assimilate it, and and so my firm represents papers, and I'm editors and reporters who continually tell you that we are not in the business of writing history. We are in the business of writing today's news for tomorrow's paper. And I think the same thing as doing lots of research, and I sympathize with that. I don't like it, but I sympathize with that. But that wasn't what Joe was telling us. Joe wasn't saying, I got this book. The book has to be out at the end of the trial, and so there may be mistakes, and that's too bad. And it was just the opposite. At the end, as I said, I vividly remember that the day the trial ended, and Joe and I were back at that little motel, and just trundled Jeff off to jail, and we were back at the little motel. And I still remember on the balcony, and Joe, he just volunteered to me. He said, I don't know, Sterling Ward called or somebody called, but Parade magazine wanted him to write an article that week about the trial. And he was almost teary-eyed about how could they think that he could do that? He needed to think about what had just happened. It was so traumatic and emotional. It was just so ridiculous that these folks wanted him to churn out a piece of journalism, that was timely. Because he said, this is just going to be a lot more difficult, serious, and heart-wrenching thing than he never thought, because the implication was he thought Jeff was going to be acquitted. Now he wasn't. Now he really had to rethink the whole thing. I said that. I respected that. I really did appreciate that.
It's interesting. I guess it suggests that there is a terrific gap between ambition and product. And not only he's sincere in his pretensions. Do you think?
Well, I have never.
I'm making it feel.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I thought I knew Joe well enough to make statements about him. Maybe I don't, but I never thought of him as being, just utterly cynical. And even today, I'm not sure that he is utterly cynical. Although certainly it's easy to draw that conclusion. And I think, as I said, I think you're right. I think he may have more pretensions than he has ability to deal with the facts that he gathers, and certainly, his own personal views do color things, and he, he's in a way he's kind of caught in the worst of all possible worlds from a writer. His own views color things, but he doesn't want to deal with that as a writer, so he tries the sort of dispassionate approach, which, as you said, kind of gives you this fuzzy feeling that he hasn't grasped anything, but you certainly do know that he didn't like what he saw, but you don't exactly know why. So it's kind of hard to.
And also, I think this fuzziness is really the quality that makes the blockbusters, which then enables the reader sort of impose
Sure, you
respect.
can, yeah, you get yourself a Shakespeare quote and stick it on the front, and it's all of a sudden serious. And I agree with that. I don't. I mean, that book, if you took out the Shakespeare quote at the front and took out the the sort of psychological profile, this sort of pop psychology profile of Jeff McDonald, I mean, it looks like two books almost. When there's this sort of whodunit part of the book, and then there's why he done it. But if it were just the whodunit part of the book, I really don't. I mean, I can't imagine that thing would sell very. It's just he did it. Well, yeah, but everybody knew that all along. I mean, he got convicted.
I think that doesn't explain why he's successful, because that explanation at the end, that's way in the end, I mean,
No.
plotted through this book.
To be honest, I don't know. I don't. I'm at a loss why that book. I mean, I know why I was fascinated by it, but I'm at a loss to know why other people were fascinated by it, except that it did portray. I mean, I get back to what I said at the beginning, that there was this natural sort of inherent interest in that case, in that kind of case. Handsome young doctor, Princeton, and I'm not sure that anybody couldn't have written that down. Whether he was guilty, innocent, it would have still had that kind of interest, because people are interested in handsome young doctor, Princeton Army officer, paratrooper stuff. Joe just happened to
In that structure, it didn't look as if he did it, but then finally he's revealed. Maybe it's the sort of the Oedipal bit.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean,
I think it's probably a very primitive mythic structure behind each of these popular schlocky books.
Yeah. Well, to hear Joe's letters, his letters to his editor, which are in the trial, indicated that and there's that one letter that I was finding marvel that apparently Joe's first drafts indicated Jeff did it right away. And his editor was quite unhappy about that. She said, wait a minute. We'll only be able to excerpt the first chapter. This is
No.
Yeah, let's take a look. Oops. You fit very well. And that's swamp. That's okay.
Let me see if this is working.
We'll tell you while you're doing that. Tell you something. I really love the Washington Post. I grew up, maybe as I was there during Watergate, I just became hooked on it. The Washington Post is this, has style sections for what's her name, Sally Green. The Washington Post just had yesterday an article about first of all what to wear in Washington's trendiest restaurants, and what to do if you commit a faux pas in a fancy restaurant, and you just did the wrong thing. One of the things, if you knock silver off, because I would have never said, if you knock silver off the table, you just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
The server will come, come around and do it for you. Just ignore it.
But I did save myself
Yeah,
the
that's
count.
true.
This is one of these sort of menus that
Yeah.
felt beautiful. The pasta here isn't bad, and
That's why I'm very well.
do you like wine? Should we order some?
I make sure that you order whatever you want. 'Cause I drink a lot, but I can't drink much wine. Wine has enzymes or something
Mm-hmm.
that go right to my brain and put me to sleep. One
Well-
glass of wine is all I will have.
Well, why don't we just order by the glass or?
No, go ahead and get.
All right, fine,
you want
let's
it.
get a bottle and we'll see
Sure,
what happens.
As I said, I can drink alcohol.
Or should we? Would you like to have another one of
I'll
those?
have another one of these, but I'll drink a glass of wine. Just said it's one of those things I learned late in life that I have a real big capacity for alcohol, provided it is not doesn't have sugar in it,
Mm-hmm.
like aperitifs, or doesn't have whatever wine has in it that apparently turn my brain into much. I don't get sick, I don't get honey, I don't get belligerent, I just get dairy. You know.
Would you like sap? I was struck when I visited Jeff with how we managed in this situation of being in this solitary confinement, and how much he has in himself that he can remain cheerful.
I have
like
always,
saying.
I have always admired him for that. I mean, I've always said that if that were me, I'd be in a corner sucking the thumb.
Yeah,
Jeff is a real strong guy,
Yeah.
and you know, one of the great humiliations, I guess. So this whole thing was the one time in his life where he thought he should have been stronger than he was. He wasn't. I mean, I do believe that he was. I mean, I do believe he was attacked, and I also do believe that he did not, his point of view, do enough to save his family. But by and large, since then, Jeff has always been, and he is today, pretty strong. He takes what comes, and well. That's why, you know, there was a time, I suppose, when I worried that he was going to do something to himself. I mean, I really did worry about that. Still lots of people. But that was probably, I mean, that was wrong. That was maybe there's some, you know, you project what you would do if you were in that situation. But that's not Jeff's style. And he really is a pretty strong guy, and he tries to deal with what comes along. The explanations, I mean, it's, you know, that's both a strength and a weakness, because you know, for example, that picture in those pictures in People magazine. I mean, I can't believe that Jeff didn't. I can believe Bernie didn't quite understand it, but I think Jeff didn't quite understand it. That wasn't necessarily a good thing. But his view was, look, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't have anything to hide, and I'm not going to sort of play the sort of weak little peasant meat guy just because that's what people want me to do. I mean, lots of people, especially before the trial, wanted to sort of slunk off into the sense that real quiet and kind of hide and not go out, and not have girlfriends, and not have a boat. And, and his view was I hadn't done anything wrong, and I'm not going to live my lifestyle. And and that that was a manifestation of pretty much the same thing that you see now, which is I haven't done anything wrong, and I know I haven't done anything wrong, and it is my fault I'm here. So I'm not going to, totally dependent. Well, I also said Tony is not quick to write with. He needs people, and he works at getting them to help him, but he doesn't beg stuff. He's not a, he's a,
These volunteers seem to be doing it completely.
I think that's right.
Out of idealism. It's Gail Boyce and Donna.
Bruce, I think that's right. I think they found a cause.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak as to why they,
Each
because
case, it's a different.
each case is different, and I don't really know any of them very well. So. And Jeff accepts them pretty much at face value. I mean, but he just accepted lots of people at face value all the years. It's going to have to be, well-meaning and destructive. But
Woman who wrote this really dark book, right?
A woman, a tree. I mean, that's one of those things. First time I ever met her, I said, "This woman is a nut, and you should not even deal with her." And he said, "Well, she's well-meaning and she's likable, and she means well." And I said, "Okay, whatever." And I can't, Melissa or Melinda, Linda Steven. I once got infuriated with somebody. Somebody called me up about Melinda's book. To be honest, I don't like calls at home from people when I'm talking about the McDonald's case. I don't like them in the office, but when I go home, I don't want to be called by supporters. I don't care how good they are. I mean, I don't even want to be called by his mother unless it's bad. Somebody called me up to tell me about Linda's book. And I didn't want to hear about it. He said, I really didn't want to hear about it. And they persisted. And I said, look, I said, when I first met her, I realized she's a nut. I think she's a nut. And I told Jeff that he shouldn't deal with it. And something that he's going to have to pay the price for because she's there. And this person I did on the phone said, usually you can't blame Melinda for everything. I said, yes, I can. I can blame Melinda for being, and I do. It's only about that big. I mean, I don't like her. I never liked her. I don't like I don't like that kind of sort of fanatic devotion. Sure. We're going to split.
Yeah, I think we'll start with a salad. Yeah, great.
Salad?
Yeah. I like spaghetti pomodoro.
And I have zuppa di lenticchie and menacondit.
She's a very peripheral character, though, isn't she?
She certainly is. But she's one of these people who, for reason again, I don't quite know what the keyhole in her mind looks like. The keys fit that whatever it was, it became an affection with her. But there have been other people like that over the years. I mean, for one reason or another, this is an obsession. People who are really, who personally didn't know the players until afterwards. And she won on them. And to be honest, I have no comprehension about what it is that led her to devote It's cartoon, not in her life, but it had a fair amount of money to this.
She privately expressed
I think so. I mean, I think it's vanity.
I didn't read it. I saw
Why
the
is-
jurors showed it to me. And
Yeah.
it just totally.
I haven't read it either, and I'm certainly not going to read it.
You saw it, right? You saw that type. It's in a kind of strange.
I have I know two other people who privately printed books. One of them was my uncle, father's younger brother. And he wrote this sort of, what do you call it, roman about himself. It was boring, awful stuff. He was a real nice guy. And I couldn't imagine what got into him to write this. And they made it privately printed. And I actually read it. Because I felt compelled to read it before I already knows saying how much I enjoyed it, and I couldn't bring myself to write that note. I remember writing this real non-committal note about thank you for the book. And one of my partners last year, actually his ex-wife, he sort of paid his ex-wife to ghost a book about. There's a reporter in Phoenix, Don Bowles, she had killed, got blown up. It's an investigative reporter. And the Investigative Reporters Association of the World, or some group of reporters came down to Phoenix and did this expose of Phoenix, which a lot of newspapers didn't run because liveness. They investigated it. They tried to. It was the quintessential plot that these folks came up with. Everything was tied into everything else. The mafia was tied into the business community. The business community was tied into the Goldwaters and tied into wherever it was, and it all somehow they connected with blowing up this reporter. Well, there's a lot, and it was all bullshit too. It was that a lot of the newspapers that sponsored it wouldn't even write it. Anyway, one of the bystanders in this was one of my partners. He was Italian. He was of course the biggest and most successful and prominent and wealthy Italian families in Arizona. And these reporters took out after his family. And they tried to tie him in, every mob there was. And poor Joe cracked. I mean, he just went nuts up. And his recovery for that, his therapy was to write this horrible novel about this brave young Italian lawyer in Arizona sending off the evil investigative reporters who were out to slime his families. And I started that because he gave me a copy of it. And honestly, I got one chapter into it. I couldn't even be polite with it. I just said, "That's it. Sorry, I'm not going to do this." That's what I feel. I mean, Melinda, I haven't even opened the first page. I can't do it, and I'm not going to do it.
Oh God, terrible writing going on every moment. Do you do a lot of writing as a lawyer?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of editing. I don't write as much. One of the things about what I do is as you get older and your rates go up, the drafting of legal. I don't draft documents. I draft briefs. I'm a litigator, so I don't do wills. But the briefs that you write tend to be written first by somebody else, and I am not a particularly. I know some lawyers who are voracious editors. They might as well start out doing it themselves because they don't like when anybody else writes.
See the younger people than you're from
Yeah.
with the writing.
Yeah, but I'm not that way. I tend to try to accommodate them. Well, actually, I think I'm pretty good at it. And in my own, I sort of speaking about people who do sort of writing on the side. I really do like to write like short stories or novels, so they just sort of go in my drawers. But there I'm much different. It's a much different kind of writing, and I'm much more careful and thoughtful and demanding than I am in my business because it's for a different purpose. It's to satisfy me.
You were writing a novel?
I've written several. I did
Really?
4 or 5. 5. In my drawer, I've got a couple of really shitty thoughts. I like it. I mean, it's very.
It's in your drawer, right? Have you tried to publish?
No, I have no idea. Actually, most of them I don't think I've even thought about doing.
Is in here, have you met boy child?
I get home tomorrow. I head straight to the gym and try to work off this last week's booze. To write because it's a different. So someday, maybe someday my ego is going to get to me. Maybe it will come sooner rather than later. But for the last, this is college. I mean, this is really 20, 25 years. I sort of looked at writing as, it's not therapy because I've never written sort of about needs or even about people. I write, it's nice to make things up. I mean, you always write about things in the sense you just don't know. Unless you're, I guess, maybe read science fiction or something. Which I don't like. I always write about people, about characters that have a genesis in real life, but it's sort of your opportunity to go home, close the door, have a couple of drinks, and play God, can make up characters.
You start with a situation, with an action, and then
Me?
yeah, I mean, how what character or with
Generally, I start with
Does Alex explain him?
like an episode.
yeah.
I mean, usually what happens is something catches my fancy. Some episodes. When you start thinking about it, you start thinking, well, what if characters get involved in this? What were the characters doing? And the episode tends to change, and the characters tend to change, and then there are more characters, and then it's a very elastic. For me, it's a very elastic process. It's very very therapeutic process because you aren't locked into what I'm locked into every day, and that is somebody else does. Every case I have. The real lawyerly skill is to marshal the facts that are already there. And the lawyerly sin was to make up new facts. That's a lie. It's unethical. And it's a fine line, though, because sometimes the facts that you have to work with, you really don't like and wish you could sort of make up new ones to go along with it. That is one of those things is that I just can't tell you how many lawyers I know who do that. Every once in a while, they just realize the facts that are there are not winners, so they just elaborate on them. And but lawyers have this system of citation. They're supposed to cite to the record, and sometimes it's very disconcerting to go read the record cites that your opponents or sometimes your young lawyers get this thing and it's okay. X said Y on such and such day, cite to a record. So it sounds good. So you go read it. It doesn't say that at all. If it says the little T's, you get frozen. Very disconcerting. Frozen. Thanks. Any pepper, madam?
No, thank you.
Anyway, but the nice thing about being a novelist or short story is there are no ethical constraints. You can do what you want. Yeah. And you tend to like the characters, not like the characters. I must confess that it's much harder to write about characters you don't like than you like. Two reasons I've never really thought about doing this for a living or even trying to do it for a living is I tend to write about things that I know and understand. I mean, characters I know and understand. And I don't think I had any characters that I wind up really disliking. Sometimes they start out that way, but they tend to become a lot more likable because you make them. So you can make them any way you want.
Have you thought of writing about the McDonald case.
Well, yes, I did, but not as a novel. Actually, the reason I thought about it was I don't know. There's a this is an element of Jeff's. I could kill him for this, but I won't. He called me once from prison and said there was a reporter for the Christian Science Monitor who had been writing him and was really interested in the case. That's a fine. And he said she would really like to talk to me. So I said, okay, and I called her up. Well, it turns out she wasn't a reporter. She was a sort of she worked for the Monitor and she did occasional sort of articles. And she is, except for the fact I do like her, and I've gotten to like her. But in her own way, she's kind of like Melinda. She still has never met Jeff. But she is not only absolutely convinced of Jeff's innocence, but and hates Joe. I mean, she has all the right things to say. She hates Joe, hates the bug, Jeff's innocent. But she is more than deeply than that. She's just a true believer. And I don't like, I mean, true believers who don't know why they're true believers disturb me. At least why I'm no longer Catholic. Anyway, Barbara, she lives in Boston and she knows lots and lots and lots of people. And out of the blue one day, she called me up and she said, I have this friend, there's published in Boston, who would really like you, meaning me, to put together a proposal for a McDonald's book. I said, well, I have, over the years, several people suggested that to me. And I always said no, because I'm not interested in doing it. I'm not sure I want to devote the time or the energy to doing it. Because I got an active practice of law and it would be expensive for me to do it. And I don't know what would come of it. Excuse me? She persisted. She said, no, it's really true. It's really interesting. And this is before I didn't know she was really a reporter. She said, I'll do all the legwork. You tell me who the interviews are and whatever it is, and I'll go do them. And I'll do and I said, look, if that happens, I said, I want you to take them. I don't want summaries. Because I don't trust stuff like that. But if you're willing to do all that, then I would think of it. Because I just really don't have the time or the energy to spend 2 years going around talking to people and assembling all the facts and getting things all down. And I, to be honest, don't particularly want to write Mike Malley's view of the MacDonald case off the top of my head. She said, fine. So, I said, okay. And then she said, okay, you have to do treatment, probably whatever you call it. Something like that. So I did. I mean, it's one of those things I sat down and I outlined the book. It took me about a week. Yeah. But it was one of those things, once I thought about it, I really knew what that outline was. And so I sent it to her. And she swooned. She just, that's wonderful. I said, okay, you're right. You go do it. And she took it to this publisher, and I must confess, she wasn't lying. One of the editors she knew called me up and said, yes, we did. But we have to present it to some committee or something like that. And they called me back, and it's really funny. I guess it's very carefully worded book. Worded note saying that they would like me to delete all references to Joe McGinnis out of the book because
What publisher was this?
I'd rather not tell because they didn't think that an anti-Joe McGinnis, and I didn't realize I would this outline that would look like an anti-Joe McGinnis. But it was after television, it was pretty clear that I disagreed with what. And they didn't think that an anti-Joe McGinnis book was either saleable or in anyone's best interests. I said, fine. And that's the end of that. I still have the outline, and I went to one publisher. I never tried to shop it around. Barbara said, oh, no, I'll take it down to New York. And I said, no, Barbara, this was your idea. These were your friends.
I wouldn't say yes if I did it.
And if they don't want it, I'm really not interested. I mean, this isn't a crusade in my life, to write this book. So, instead I have an outline.
Oh, and if you don't trust him, I'm not even going to make it. Okay, that's gonna make it. Okay, I'm gonna make it.
But other than that, no, I've never thought about it. Although I think the more I think about it, the more I think it would make I don't want to roll on a slap either. I don't want a book about the MacDonald case with fictional characters, with fictional names. But it would make a good novel. But it'd make a good novel if Joe were the fictional character and not Jeff. Jeff would clearly have to be the secondary character. And Joe should be the character. I mean, there's a book about, maybe it's the book you do. I don't know.
I don't know what I'm doing yet, but it's something. Maybe do something like that. Well, I think so. As far as I've got in my thinking, it has something to do with real people and characters in books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all so paradoxical and interesting, and that's the lawsuit is so interesting. Which is I mean, it's like somebody out of a book, suing the author, right? About the fictional character.
Yeah, it's.
They were both slouching.
Well, as I said, I on some levels, it sympathized with Joe because he, I don't think, never, that Joe was, as cynical to say, well, I really think he's innocent, but that isn't going to sell a book, so I got to write a book that makes him guilty. I just don't believe it, and I never believed that. But and so in some sense, I'm kind of sympathetic to the sense that we presume he came to dislike Jeff and think he was guilty. But on another level, I'm not sympathetic because he says he reached that conclusion fairly early on. And then to continue his protestations of friendship and undying admiration of love and affection, seems to me to be difficult human situation to put yourself in.
I'll bring it out. Yeah, I think you're right. This is why he would be an interesting character in a novel, because it's the flaw in his character.
Yeah, and it's a serious one.
He just does not know how to be anything but ingratiating, probably, right?
I think that's right. I think Joe, more than anything else in life, wants to be loved. In that sense, he very much loved it. I'm not kidding about that. They both really, really, really want to be loved. But unlike Jeff, Joe also wants to pass judgment on everyone. Joe is a very judgmental guy. And that's what's not so obvious about. It's pretty obvious when you read his books, but it's not obvious at all when we talk to him. He, because Joe has this sort of attitude of eternal tolerance. Yeah, sort of. It's clear, it's clear. In Joe Olson, it's very clear who he likes and who he doesn't like, just sort of on a visceral level. Like I said, he didn't like Bernie.
Yeah.
Didn't like Sarah. And, he makes that very clear. So you sort of assume, well, he would hear his heart on his sleeve about his feelings towards people. And it turns out that either his feelings change rapidly or that's kind of it.
Well, he probably did like Jeff, but just didn't know how to deal with
Yeah.
I feel that
Well, you did know how to deal with it.
it's horrifying. So
I don't buy that at all. See, that's where I really don't buy that. Joe knew how to deal with that. I mean, Joe knew that the way to deal with that is to, I mean, I think, is to confront Joe. But he also knew that would just shut down the book. I mean, Joe knew how to deal with it because he did deal with it. He continued for over a year misleading Jeff and everybody around him. And
but that's not dealing with it.
well,
That's
it
running
is.
away from.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you mean by dealing with it. I mean, dealing with it maybe on an emotional level, no, but on a sort of a practical level, yes, it is dealing with it very well.
Yeah, but but humanly
no, it isn't. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah.
and artistically.
Well, see that I'm not in a position to judge. I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I don't. I mean, I suppose some people would say, kind of William Butler would say, artistically, that is dealing with it because you have a higher calling. Calling is to sort of.
But I think that he would have gotten a much more interesting portrait if he had tried to study the as murderer.
Sure.
Okay, this is what he believed.
But that's what he believed. I agree.
That's what Dostoevsky did.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, if I were in Joe's position, that's what I would. I think I would have really tried to confront this guy that I now realize A, I like, but B, is killed his wife and kids and has lied about it all these years. I mean, that's what I would have. If I were in Joe's position, I think that's what I would have tried to do. It may have been, but it may have been very hard to do.
Is it possible that if Joe had said, Jeff, look, I think you did it. Let's go on talking. Would Jeff go on talking with him?
I think Jeff would have.
Yeah.
I think Bernie would have gone crazy, but the funny thing about Bernie is Bernie in a way would have been easier to deal with than Jeff because all Joe would have had to say was, "But I still have an open mind. You can still convince me." Then Bernie would have tried. Jeff, I think, would have done it just because he would have just refused to believe that this guy that Jeff liked a lot had that attitude. Jeff would have just gone right on talking and right on trying to deal with him because I don't think Jeff really would have believed that Joe was encouraging that.
Yeah.
But Joe didn't.
He might have even been able to persuade him.
He might have. I don't know. I mean, I know, as I said, there's certainly, if you look at that book, I mean, there's certainly lots of details that Joe would have gotten right instead of wrong by doing that. Because somebody would have said, "Wait a minute, Joe. The psychiatrist business, that's kind of crappy. You really don't feel nice here or something." But, I don't know why Joe didn't do that, except that he didn't.
You want to keep this in? Actually, why don't you have some of this now? I think.
No,
No?
I think I will wait. That's fine.
You want to keep it on the side? Maybe you have someone who's
Sure.
okay.
Right.
Really?
I might get one at the end as soon as but I don't know. And salad the Italian way at the end of the morning.
Oh, wait, I didn't know. You were.
Italians do a lot of things backwards.
The French should do that. But
The Italians do it too. In some places, and I mean, with Carlo Trattoria is the dope. They had the antipasta and they had the salad. The fancy Roman restaurants. Maybe that's because it's in French.
Yeah.
The salad to do over here.
Well, I used to be very snobbish about that. And then I went to California, and I converted to the California method. There's something very nice about it.
Salads are one of those things in life that I liked them, but I've never liked them enough to sort of salivate over them. And sometimes I look on salads as the restaurant's way of trying to show you, giving you enough food.
I can do time. That's why I put it on record. And there's so much this thing.
Well, Jeff has a kind of, and everything I say about him is really based on just his 2 meetings with him and a few letters. But he's a very gay person, isn't he?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, he's not. As I said, yeah, making the best of a bad situation. And that is pretty much what he has done for the last 18, 17 years. He's worked very hard at it. And a lot of people that's one of his sort of public relations problems.
Yeah.
That a lot of people have put that, it's kind of people's expectation to me. A lot of people sort of assume that somebody in his situation would have, and that's what Freddie assumed. That Jeff would have done one of two things. He just spent the rest of his life hunting the killers, which is what Freddie wanted,
yeah.
or in being in deep mourning. Jeff has never wanted to do either. He wanted to do one, actually wanted to do both for a fairly short period of time, and then he realized, but he was 26 years old at the time, and that's a long life to lead deep mourning and or as a fanatic. And he moved on to other things, and lots of people didn't understand that, including Freddie, and including people like I said, like Mrs. Grandmother. It was just she's a nice person, very sympathetic. But once she saw those pictures on the People magazine, she just decided that was inappropriate, even though it was 7 years after that's where Jeff was. It was just inappropriate. He shouldn't have been there. And like, as I said, it kind of depends on how you look at it. If you expect somebody in Jeff's situation to be marked for life psychologically and display that, then he wouldn't be the way he is. But if you expect him, which is kind of what I came to expect him to do, to just really try to do the best he can and sort of move on and make something out of his life, which is what he did, then what he's doing in prison doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's part of the. It's the fact that I don't. I concede the needs of prisons, but I don't like them. And people who are in them, I don't care who they are.
Paperback. I
have to deal with because prisons set rules. I don't like. Yes. Oh no, seriously. That's right. Kind of. Thank you. Literally not some of She's madam.
Yes, please.
She's that. And
They want to.
Look at that, yeah, say yeah. That's fine, like.
infection.
All this, everybody, I said, so don't say a word. You're on tape over this. Oh, you got it all.
It's really, it's a ruined life, isn't it? But it's not the 26.
It is. Jeff's life has been dominated by this for, since he's 26. And unless something, dramatic happens, he'll get out of prison at the end of the session.
You don't think he will succeed in getting out in 91 when he's paroled?
I could say.
Yeah.
I hope so.
That's just the one.
No, and besides, just the structure of the federal parole system is such that, people are, we are not in a day and age when forgiveness and rehabilitation are part of the criminal justice system. We're in a day and age of putting them in jail and making them stay there a long time because we're very afraid of criminals, and probably rightly so. Crime is part of it, and again, this is sort of like Patty Hearst. This being a celebrity criminal works to your disadvantage once you are convicted, because people are parole boards and other people are very afraid of saying you gave in to there's sort of middle class or upper middle class status. And that's why, I mean, I really do believe it's true. Had he spent an extra year or so in prison, and most people have no position. And Jesse, I think, is going to spend an extra similar years in prison than other people in his position will.
Pessimistic about it.
Unless there's some new evidence or something that you can bring to court. Yes, I think it's always possible that the next administration's parole board will be composed entirely of mothers of criminal defendants. But if that's not the case,
So you don't think we should possibly get him in trial?
I think it's possible, but it's not likely. I mean, it's very, very, very unlikely. The system has run its course. And one of the things that did you read Bonfire of the Vandals?
I started it, and I just didn't want to spend.
I know. It's, as I said, the people are liking it. But one of the things that Tom Wolfe, he hits lots of things right in here. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't live in New
I
York.
find other things, and you can be very funny, even when you hate what you're saying. You're sort of laughing and hating yourself.
But one of the things he has right in there, from my point of view, is once the system gets going, it goes. It's not stoppable. And the system in Jeff's case went a long time, and it ultimately, it's done. The regular system is done. So once that happens, there's just enormous reluctance to look back. The wheels of justice grind slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. But once they grind exceedingly fine, nobody likes to go back and think, wonder if we made a mistake. And they aren't going to do it.
Yeah. And this whole, that's the idea that he was cleared by the devil. And then,
Yep.
I mean, do you think if somebody
It's unfair.
did anything to end up where he is?
No.
No.
I think what he did, what he did do was, it was almost inevitable. What he did was alienate Freddie, but there was no way to keep Freddie on his side without turning him into a fanatic, which is what Freddie did. I mean, Freddie chose his lifestyle of being a fanatic crime buster. And if Jeff had played the game and they both collectively decided the criminals were someone else, I'm sure today Jeff and Freddie could be off, in Central America someplace looking for the real criminals. Every lead there is, every rumor there is. Freddie would have loved chasing him. And if Jeff hadn't really played the game.
It's too bad I didn't go after Stokely together at that point, huh?
Well, as I said, I think it's too bad a lot of people didn't do that, but they didn't. And it's, as I said, when Jeff told that lie to Freddie and then said, I told a lie, and that was the end of it. And Jeff, as I said, basically his instincts, which I must confess, I think were the right ones, but they came out the wrong way, were to put it behind you. My old Catholic upbringing, there's this great, never understood this when I was a kid. I always thought it was real cynical. I don't remember which gospel it comes from, but Jesus is reported to have said, let the dead bury their dead. And I think it's a real strange, cynical thing to say, but that's in fact what happened. Jeff eventually decided the dead are dead. And as much as that was a part of his life, he couldn't live that. And Freddie could. Freddie loved it. And Freddie, to this day is, every time it's about ready to drop, Freddie does something to revive it. He's suing Jeff for the proceeds of the work.
What do you make of that lie?
What?
Jeff's lie about killing that person.
Well, my own view is, having accused Joe of pop psychology and now engaging in pop psychology, fully and completely admitted. That's what Jeff wanted to do. That's what Jeff wished he had done that night. And that's what Jeff thought the world expected of him, particularly Freddie. And it was and it was what Freddie wanted to hear. And, Freddie did want to hear that. So
You see it as wish fulfillment.
so it was wish fulfillment, and it was real practical because assuming Freddie were a rational person, it would have satisfied him. Because it said you have to understand what from what Jeff says and his mother says. Every time they saw Freddie and Mildred, no matter what else was going on, Freddie and Mildred brought the subject around to the deaths found among the kids and the killers. And it was a way for Jeff, assuming Freddie had bought it, assuming Freddie could have bought it, never to have asked another question because it would have been over. There was no more to talk about. Then you could say, okay, it's the curtain is down. Let's leave the theater and get back to your life. Unfortunately, Freddie Millie just didn't climb it up. I mean, claim he found all four of them. That would have solved it. But, not only apparently did Freddie buy it, he was ready to go look for the rest of them.
He did originally buy it, really.
Okay, that's what Jeff says, and so his mother.
Yeah.
So, and that's why Jeff wrote that letter, because the response that he got wasn't what Jeff expected. The response Jeff expected was, okay, it's done. Instead, the response was, let's go get the rest of them. And as soon as that happened, Jeff knew he had a real problem was, and he had to tell Freddie, hey, this is a fantasy that I'm sorry I brought up.
I know, but somebody said.
I think that's what it is, but again, that is pop psychology. I think though, that's the kind of lie, knowing Jeff, that I didn't shock me that it said it.
Yeah. Did he ever talk to you about his feelings about losing Collide and the children?
He was devastated. He really was devastated. And as time goes on, I mean, that's what I remember about the summer of 1970. Is that we talked more about that than we talked about the case. That was the time when the case was the most interesting, because it was all new. It was most interesting to me. And to be honest, that's what I was less interested in that then than I was in all the things about the case. That's really what Jeff wanted to talk about, and that's what I was good for, because, I was an old friend. I knew Clay, I knew kids. I didn't know the kids, soon one of us baby. But yeah, he talked about it a lot. He was very lonely and very upset. And
This doesn't come across in McGinnis's book at all.
And I'm not sure. I wasn't. I mean, Joe and Jeff spent a lot of time together. I don't know what they talked about.
But the thrust of McGinnis's thing was that he just was not sufficiently upset about these
Well,
deaths.
by 7 years later, 8 years later, that may have been true from Joe's point of view. It was not true right after that. I don't know. I know that I know that for like 3 or 4 years.
Why not us?
Yeah, I remember February 17th was a day you didn't touch Joe. Because I'm in